my people, how you doing? Hope you're having a fantastic damn day. Welcome back to the channel. Today I'll be breaking down Gasparini's 3-4-1-2 formation in the game FC24. Of course, as always, if you do enjoy it, please hit that like button down below. It helps the algorithm let people know that maybe might not know the channel that this is a decent channel, to say the very least. Of course, we are on the race to 3,000 subscribers before the end of the year, so if we can hit that mark, I'd be forever grateful to each and every single one of you guys for helping me and the channel get to that fantastic, massive landmark. So, enough talking, let's hop on straight into the video. Okay, so for the formation going forward, I haven't really changed anything. It's the 3-4-1-2 formation, so it's one goalkeeper, 3 centre-backs, 2 central midfielders, 2 wider midfielders, 1 attacking midfielder, and then of course a dual striker. Now moving on to the tactics. Of course, tactical vision, I have set it to wing play. Gasparini likes to try and split the opposition's defensive setup into 2 halves, obviously trying to work the ball along each side of the touchline depending on which side the ball is on. And they do have a bit more support in those wide areas. You'll see the midfielders, they try and offer an extra pass or an extra man in those wider regions, as well as your 2 strikers up front will also look to try and split off and try and not stay centrally as much, but try and offer as much support to those wider channels as can be, often looking to run those wider channels when those balls are fired in over the top. So I think wing play best suits what they are trying to produce on the field. As for the defensive side of things, they aren't looking to aggressively, counter press and make sure that the opposition are under a load of stress and pressure all the time. They'll look to sit back a bit, keep their shape, keep their structure, make sure that they're very hard to break down, and they'll look to try and capitalize potentially on a mistake that either the goalkeeper, the defender, the midfielder, or even the striker makes, and they'll look to try and transition into a quick attack of their own. The team width is set to a very compact 15, making it very hard for the opposition to try and play through the central areas of the pitch. The depth, however, it does vary. I will say this, you can probably drop it between 45 and maybe even pushing up to 60. It still maintains that mid-block approach, which is what you're trying to produce. And I would say maybe if you are playing a team like AC Milan or Inter Milan or a very attacking side, feel free, drop the line ever so slightly. It does obviously protect you and offer a bit more protection. But I've gone with a 55 depth. Like I say, you are trying to replicate that mid-block approach, and it also does protect your goalkeeper as well as your backline from those potential counterattacks or balls over the top to try and obviously exploit your backline. Moving on to the offensive side of things now, of course, the builder play is set to a balanced approach. Now, more times than not, you will see the centre-back show for the ball when the goalkeeper looks to try and restart the game for goal kicks and so on. Very good and collected on the ball. I will say this, playing up from the back, they are quite solid at doing so, especially your wider centre-backs. We will get onto their instructions on how you can get the best out of them. But they do try and look to work the ball into those wider centre-backs who will then look to progress the ball forward and potentially through the final thirds of the field. The chance creation is set to a forward run approach, opening up a lot of space between the lines for both your midfielders as well as your 2 strikers to try and work into as well. And it does, create a bit more havoc for your opposition. Like I said, the whole point of these tactics is to try and split the opposition into those wider areas, trying to either create an overload on the one side, offering up a lot of space for your players on the other side of the field to try and work into as well, or potentially creating a lot of havoc in those wider regions, offering a lot of space in the central areas for potentially one of your strikers to work with, or maybe even your number 10. The width is set to 90 now. Obviously, I've been saying this, they try and work the ball either down the left or the right touchline, offering up a lot of players in those wider areas and vacating a lot of the central areas of the pitch. So I will say it is very risky, but it's something that Atalanta love to do, try and overload those wider regions. If you are counter-attacked on and they do tend to work the ball into that central area, you could potentially have a bad case on your hands. But nonetheless, when they are out of possession, they do look to try and shrink as much as possible, making it very hard for the opposition to at least try and get into that central area with the ball. So going forward, you will look to try and get the ball into your fullbacks / your wingbacks / your wide midfielders, and they'll look to try and whip in crosses and supply your forwards. As for players in the box, I have gone with it set to 6. It does offer your 3 attackers and, well, your 2 strikers, I should say, as well as your number 10, so your 3 attackers in the box, and then it does allow for ample players in and around the area to try and circulate and rotate the ball. As for corners and free kicks, as for always, I've set it to 4. Starting off with the instructions, of course, at the back with the goalkeeper, a more of a traditional goalkeeper, and of course it does go hand in hand with him not having to run outside of his box because you aren't playing the highest of lines. So inevitably, you are playing a very compact structure, which does mean that if your fullbacks are not back in time, more times than not, your opponents will have a lot of space in those wider areas of the field, and they inevitably will whip in crosses to their forwards. Now, you need your goalkeeper to be hands-on, very good in the air, and good thing Atalanta have a very decent goalkeeper at doing so, so I have set Musa to come for crosses and also being a bit more of a traditional goalkeeper. Like I said earlier, you aren't playing the highest of lines, you have decent centre-backs that all have really good recovery pace on them as well, so they can look to try and recover the no man's land balls that are going to be whipped over the top for the opponent's strikers. So yes, you don't really need him doing too much with that. Moving on into our backline now. Of course, I'm going to butcher this man's name, but Demisti, I'm pretty sure that's not how you say it. But anyway, it is what it is. He is going to be the base set of instructions for his overall position as that central defender. You don't really want him doing too much. You want him to be able to potentially just hold his position and be at the base of the entirety of the outfield players, which is what he will do going forward. Moving on to your other centre-backs, Scalvini and Said Kolasinac, Arsenal man, former Arsenal man, I should say. That's the only reason why I know how to pronounce his name. Both of them are set to being overlapping centre-backs. Like I said earlier, they often try and, help out in those wider areas, supplying either midfielders or centre-backs into those wider channels to offer that extra passing space and trying to draw out the opposition into those wider channels. So both Kolasinac as well as Scalvini will look to progress the ball forward and play it out to the fullbacks and then potentially look to try and support them in those wider channels. Moving on though to your midfielders now, we've got the likes of Darun and Koopmeiners. Now, starting off with Darun, I've set him to drop between the defenders, and obviously when you're starting out with the ball to play from the back, especially from goalkeeper restarts, you want one of your midfielders at least to try and show for the ball, and that offers a nice passing option for your centre-backs, especially the likes of Scalvini and Kolasinac. And also, if one of them are out of position, he can look to try and drop between the lines, pick up that space, that area if need be, and look to try and defend any potential counter-attacks that will be thrown at you. As for the support on crosses, not really always being the box-to-box player, because obviously he does have a deeper starting position, but sometimes having the ability to work his way into the box and land on some of those crosses that will be fired in, but other times looking to stand the edge of the area, looking to try and rotate and facilitate for better scoring opportunities. Aggressive interceptions are set to be on, and this does go hand in hand with trying to maintain a very compact structure in the central areas, and you will see the defensive position I've also said and set them to cover the central area. So you are very much looking to try and break up as much of the opposition's play in that central bit of the park as can be. And then for the positioning freedom, it's set to drift wide. So when you are in possession of the ball, you will look to try and offer an extra body into those wide areas, looking to try and help the likes of Zappacosta or the likes of Baker with the ball movements going forward. Moving on to Koopmeiners, is a very similar role, but slightly different, obviously. Starting off with the attacking support, set to stay back when attacking. So he will also have a bit of a deeper starting position. Obviously not as deep as what Darun would have, but again, looking just to maintain the defensive structure if you do lose the ball. But again, support on crosses, sometimes having the ability to break into the box, attack those crosses, or potentially the cutback opportunities, and maybe even get on the score sheet for themselves. Aggressive interceptions are set to be on for him, as well as cover the center and drift wide. Very much like Darun, looking to offer an extra body or a passing opportunity in those wider areas. Moving on into our wider areas now, of course, there will be your wing backs, your wingers, your midfielders in those wider areas. There'll be everything. Both Baker and Zappacosta have the same set of instructions, starting off with the ability for them to come back on defense. Now, you are playing a back three. The opposition will inevitably have a lot of space in these wider channels because you only have one player running up and down each flank. So you need to bear with me when there will be crosses fired into your box, and you should expect both your goalkeeper as well as your three centre-backs to deal with those issues. But nonetheless, they will look to track back as well as get forward, patrolling each side of the touch lines. Staying wide, though, is essential. They do look to try and, generate as much space down either flank as possible, and that does come with them holding the width on each side. They will also have a lot of supports, either the centre-backs, the full-backs, sorry, not the full-backs, either the centre-backs or the midfielders, and even the strikers look to try and drift into those wider channels, looking to try and help supply bodies and space and passing in those wider areas, looking to try and split the opposition when required. I will also say this though, they do look to try and overload in certain moments, and it's down and right on the D-pad. I might be wrong, but just look for whichever one is ball overload or side overload or something like that. They do look to try and win the ball back very aggressively, and that goes to my next step soon. But the support runs is set to getting in behind, looking to try and open up as much space and exploit the opposition's backline when required, often getting in behind the opposition, looking to supply crosses and cutbacks for the strikers. And then this is where the aggression comes in. So both fullbacks / wide midfielders will inevitably look to try and engage with the opposition, win the ball back very aggressively in those wider areas of the field, and then transition into a quick, swift counter-attack. As for the supports on crosses, because they are fullbacks, it's not very regular that I will do this, but I have noticed that with those wider midfielders, they do encourage them to get into the box to try and attack those potential crosses or failed crosses if they are specifically overhit to the back post. So they will also look to try and get into the box when required. Maybe the likes of Lookman isn't in the attacking third, the likes of Baker will look to try and replace him in that final area. As you can see here for the likes of Zappacosta, he's got the same set of instructions as well. Now, moving on to our number 10, Mario Pasalic. I think a former Chelsea man? Might be wrong. For the defensive support, he's set to a basic defensive support, so sometimes looking to track back, have a bit of a deeper starting position when building up the offense, or potentially hanging up the field, and sometimes even slotting in to potentially be a second or a third forward when required. The support on crosses as well is set to balance, so sometimes allowing him to break into the box, other times looking to hang around the edge of the area, looking to try and facilitate and create for others. And then for the positioning freedom, goes without saying, most times you are looking to try and help in those wider areas, so he will look to offer up an extra body, an extra pass, and go into those wider positions, trying to help facilitate either on the left or the right flank of the field. And then finally, the interceptions is set to normal. And finally, moving on into our forward line though, the likes of Lookman and Scamacca. We'll start off with Ademola Lookman, who is having, or last season he had a very good season. I'm not exactly sure if he's having a good season again this year, but nonetheless, I think he's done very, very well with his move to Atalanta. The support runs is set to balance, so sometimes taking up central areas, other times looking to offer up those wider channels, running those channels to try and track down those loose balls, or looking to try and support either the likes of Baker or Coop Miners or Kolasinac in those wider areas of the field. Getting in behind though is essential. He will be the one of the two strikers that will look to try and consistently play off the shoulder of the opposition's back line. Aggressive interceptions is set to be on for him, as well as having a basic defensive support. So sometimes he does look to try and drop off a bit, taking up a bit more of a number 10 role in certain areas of the field. And more or less the shape does change, because with the likes of Lookman dropping off and Pasalic sometimes playing slightly wider, it does take up a bit more of a 3-4-3 formation, and you will see that throughout the course of your gameplay as well. Moving on finally to the likes of Scamacca, a bit more of a target man, but again, he can look to make those runs in behind, and with the tactics set to forward runs, he will naturally look to get in behind as well. But again, you want him to have a bit more of a structure to him, and that's why I've gone with him to have a balanced width, so also can help in those wider areas or run those channels as well. But more importantly, he will be a target man, having the ability to back into the opposition, hold up the play. I think Bilal as well is also very effective in this role. And then, of course, aggressive interceptions are set to be on for him, as well as the ability for him to stay forward and be a bit more of the out there ball. So yes, people, that is my version of Gasparini's 3-4-1-2 formation, his set of tactics in the game FC24. If you have enjoyed this, please, like I said earlier, hit that like button down below. It does let the YouTube algorithm know that this is a decent channel, I hope. Anyways, until the next time, my dudes, subscribe, like, share, and I hope you have a damn great day. I'm out!